Emma Carter had always been a woman of structure and precision. Her job as a state tax examiner required her to pay attention to every little detail, leaving no stone unturned. So when she decided it was time for a change of scenery, she didn't just pick any place. She chose Maple Ridge Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood that promised peace, greenery, and a tight-knit community. It seemed perfect on paper, with its neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, and friendly neighbors waving from their porches. Emma imagined herself sipping coffee on her front steps while enjoying the calm mornings. But what she didn't realize at the time was that moving into this picture-perfect neighborhood would turn out to be far more eventful than she ever anticipated. The day Emma moved in, everything felt normal, or so she thought. The movers unloaded her boxes, and she spent hours unpacking and arranging furniture until her new house started feeling like home. As the sun set, she stood in her living room, admiring how cozy it looked. Everything seemed fine, until she stepped outside to take one last look around before calling it a night. That's when she noticed something odd. The garage door was slightly open. At first, Emma shrugged it off, thinking maybe she hadn't closed it properly after directing the movers where to place some heavy boxes earlier. She walked over, gave the door a firm tug to shut it, and locked it securely. Better safe than sorry, she muttered to herself. Little did she know, this small incident would become the beginning of a much bigger mystery. Over the next few days, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Every time she came back from work, she found the garage door cracked open again. At first, she chalked it up to forgetfulness or perhaps a faulty lock. But curiosity eventually got the better of her. One evening, instead of dismissing it, she grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and cautiously peeked inside. What she saw made her jaw drop. Boxes, dozens of them, stacked high against the walls of her garage. And they weren't hers. Each box was labeled in bold black letters, HOA supplies. There were cleaning products, gardening tools, spare chairs, even holiday decorations. Someone, or rather, some group had been using her garage as their personal storage space without her knowledge or permission. Emma stood there frozen, staring at the mess filling her brand new garage. She felt violated, angry, and confused all at once. Who could have done this? How had they gotten access? And why on earth would anyone think it was okay to use someone else's property like this? Her mind raced with questions, but one thing was certain. Whoever was responsible owed her an explanation and an apology. What Emma didn't know yet was that this discovery was only the tip of the iceberg. Living in Maple Ridge Estates meant dealing with the infamous Homeowners Association, HOA, a group notorious for enforcing strict rules about lawn care, parking, and noise levels. They prided themselves on maintaining order and perfection within the neighborhood. But as Emma would soon find out, their methods left much to be desired. This seemingly minor inconvenience was about to spiral into something much larger, testing not only her patience, but also her professional integrity. For now, though, Emma had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went. All she knew was that her peaceful new life had suddenly taken a very unexpected turn. The next morning, Emma woke up with a mix of emotions swirling inside her: anger, confusion, and determination. She couldn't just let this slide. Her garage was her property, and no one had the right to use it without her permission. But before jumping to conclusions or confronting anyone directly, she decided to gather more information. After all, she was used to approaching problems methodically in her job as a tax examiner. Why should this be any different? Her first step was to check if there had been some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe the movers accidentally brought those boxes into her garage by mistake, or perhaps a neighbor mistook her house for someone else's. It seemed unlikely, but she wanted to rule out every possibility before assuming malicious intent. She walked around the neighborhood, casually chatting with a few neighbors under the guise of introducing herself since she was new. "Hi, I'm Emma," she said warmly to an older woman watering plants in her front yard. "I just moved in down the street." "Oh, welcome," the woman replied with a smile. "We don't get many new faces around here. How are you settling in?" Emma hesitated for a moment before deciding to test the waters. "Pretty well, though I did notice something strange yesterday. My garage seems to have boxes that aren't mine. Any idea who might have put them there?" The woman's expression shifted slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Oh, that sounds odd," she said vaguely. "You might want to talk to the HOA board about it. They're very involved in things around here." Emma nodded politely, thanking the woman for her advice, but the vague response only fueled her suspicion. If anything, it confirmed what she already suspected. The HOA was somehow involved. Still, she needed concrete answers. Later that afternoon, she attended her first ever HOA meeting, hoping to get to the bottom of the issue. The meeting took place in the community center, a small room filled with folding chairs arranged in neat rows. A handful of residents sat quietly while 3 people sat at the front table, clearly in charge. Emma recognized them immediately from the emails she received after moving in. There was Mr. Thompson, a stern-looking man with thin glasses who seemed to enjoy talking over everyone. Mrs. Langley, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of superiority. And Mr. Patel, who mostly nodded along silently, but occasionally chimed in with technical jargon. When it came time for open discussion, Emma raised her hand. "Hi, my name is Emma Carter. I recently moved into the neighborhood, and I noticed something unusual. Someone has been using my garage to store boxes labeled HOA supplies. Can anyone explain how this happened?" There was a brief silence as the board members exchanged glances. Finally, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. Yes, Miss Carter. That must have been leftover from the previous owner. We always kept supplies there for community events. It's been going on for years." Emma blinked, stunned. "Years? You mean the last homeowner allowed you to use their garage for storage?" Mrs. Langley interjected smoothly, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Yes, dear. It's really not a big deal. The space wasn't being used anyway, so we thought it made sense to utilize it for the benefit of the community. Surely, you understand." Emma stared at them, incredulous. Not a big deal. Using someone's private property without consent wasn't exactly a minor oversight. She felt her frustration bubbling beneath the surface, but she forced herself to stay calm. "With all due respect," she said firmly, "that arrangement ended when I bought the house. This is my property now, and I didn't agree to let anyone use it, not even the HOA." Mr. Patel finally spoke up, his voice soft but firm. "Technically, Ms. Carter is correct. Without explicit permission from the current owner, such usage could be considered unauthorized." For a moment, the room fell silent. Then Mrs. Langley broke the tension with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Well, these things can always be worked out. Why don't we discuss it further after the meeting?" Emma left the gathering feeling both irritated and intrigued. These people clearly operated like they were above the rules, expecting compliance without question. But Emma wasn't about to back down. If anything, their dismissive attitude only strengthened her resolve to stand her ground, and maybe teach them a lesson about respecting boundaries. What she didn't know yet was that this confrontation was just the beginning of a much larger conflict, one that would test her patience, challenge her principles, and reveal secrets she never expected to uncover. The days following the HOA meeting were anything but quiet for Emma. Instead of addressing her concerns or apologizing for their actions, the board members seemed to double down on their dismissive attitude. Every time she tried to bring up the issue, whether through emails, phone calls, or casual run-ins around the neighborhood, they acted as if she were making a mountain out of a molehill. "It's just storage," Mrs. Langley said breezily during one such encounter. "You're not even using the space anyway." Emma clenched her fists in frustration. How could they be so blind to how wrong this was? It wasn't about whether she needed the garage. It was about respect and ownership. Her garage was her property, plain and simple, and no amount of justification from the HOA could change that fact. Determined to fight back, Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She began documenting everything. Photos of the boxes stacked inside her garage, copies of emails where she'd clearly stated her objections, and notes from conversations with the board members. She also reached out to other neighbors, hoping someone might share her outrage, or at least offer support. But most people either shrugged it off or avoided getting involved altogether. One neighbor even whispered, "Good luck with that. They don't listen to anyone." Feeling isolated but more resolved than ever, Emma turned her focus inward. If the HOA wouldn't respond to reason, maybe there was another way to hold them accountable. And then it hit her, a thought that made her pause mid-step. What if she used her professional expertise to dig deeper? As a state tax examiner, Emma spent her days scrutinizing financial records, ensuring compliance with laws, and uncovering discrepancies. She knew better than anyone how messy things could get when organizations bent or outright broke the rules. The idea of applying her skills to investigate the HOA felt almost poetic. Wasn't it ironic that the very people trampling over her rights might soon find themselves under her microscope? Her curiosity piqued. Emma started asking subtle questions during casual chats with neighbors. She learned that the HOA had a reputation for being overly controlling, often imposing fines for minor infractions, like mismatched curtains or lawn ornaments deemed too colorful. Some residents grumbled about unexplained fees tacked onto their monthly dues, while others mentioned projects promised by the board, like fixing potholes or repainting the playground, that never seemed to materialize. One evening, as Emma sat at her kitchen table reviewing her growing collection of notes, she realized something important. This wasn't just about her garage anymore. It was about fairness, transparency, and holding people accountable for their actions. If the HOA thought they could treat her, and everyone else in the neighborhood, with such disregard, then they deserved to face the consequences. But before she could act on her plan, fate intervened in an unexpected way. A letter arrived in the mail from her office assigning her to audit local organizations for compliance with state tax laws. As Emma scanned the list of entities included in the review, her heart skipped a beat. Right there, near the top, was the name * Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association *. For a moment, Emma simply stared at the page, her mind racing. Could this really be happening? Had the universe conspired to give her the perfect opportunity to expose the HOA's misdeeds? She couldn't help but laugh softly, at first nervously, then with genuine amusement. This assignment was going to be anything but routine. Still, Emma knew she had to tread carefully. Mixing personal grievances with professional responsibilities could easily backfire if handled poorly. But deep down, she felt a spark of excitement. This was her chance to shine a light on the truth, not just for herself, but for everyone living under the shadow of the HOA's unchecked power. With renewed determination, Emma prepared to dive headfirst into the investigation, knowing full well that what she uncovered might shake the foundation of Maple Ridge Estates itself. Emma wasted no time diving into her investigation. Armed with her official assignment to audit the Maple Ridge Estates HOA, she approached the task with the same precision and determination that had earned her a reputation as one of the sharpest tax examiners in the state. But this time, there was an added layer of personal stakes, something she tried hard to keep tucked away in the back of her mind. Professionalism came first, but every document she reviewed felt like peeling back another layer of a story she already suspected wouldn't have a happy ending. Her first step was requesting all financial records from the HOA: budgets, expense reports, bank statements, invoices, meeting minutes, everything they were legally required to provide. To their credit, or perhaps out of sheer arrogance, the board complied without hesitation. They likely assumed their records were flawless, or maybe they thought Emma wouldn't dig too deeply. Either way, they underestimated her, and that mistake would cost them dearly. As Emma sifted through stacks of paperwork late into the night, patterns began to emerge. At first glance, everything seemed normal enough. payments for landscaping services, pool maintenance, holiday decorations. But the deeper she looked, the more inconsistencies popped up. Expenses labeled miscellaneous appeared frequently, often in round numbers like $500 or $1,000, with no explanation attached. Other charges listed vendors Emma couldn't find online, raising red flags about whether these companies even existed. And then there were the discrepancies between reported income and actual deposits, a classic sign of mismanagement at best, fraud at worst. One discovery struck her particularly hard. Several large withdrawals marked as community improvement projects. These funds had supposedly gone toward fixing potholes, repainting fences, and upgrading playground equipment. Yet when Emma drove around the neighborhood, she saw cracked sidewalks, chipped paint on fences, and rusty swings in the park. Clearly, none of that money had been spent where it was supposed to go. But the real bombshell came when she stumbled upon a series of emails buried deep within the files. The messages revealed heated discussions among board members about how to handle homeowners who questioned fees or pushed back against rules. In one exchange, Mrs. Langley suggested creating fake invoices to justify higher dues, while Mr. Thompson dismissed concerns about legality with a curt, "No one checks anyway." Reading those words sent a chill down Emma's spine. This wasn't just poor management. It was deliberate deception. Despite her growing anger, Emma forced herself to stay focused. She knew jumping to conclusions could weaken her case, so she meticulously documented every irregularity, cross-referencing receipts, timestamps, and signatures. By the end of her review, she had compiled a damning report filled with evidence of misconduct, misuse of funds, and outright lies. It was clear the HOA had been operating under a veil of secrecy, exploiting residents' trust for their own benefit. With her findings complete, Emma faced a dilemma. As much as she wanted to march straight into the next HOA meeting and expose everything, she knew she had to handle this professionally. Her role as a state auditor meant following protocol, not seeking revenge. Still, she couldn't resist giving the board a taste of what was coming their way. She requested a private meeting with the board members, framing it as a routine update on her audit progress. When they gathered in the community center, looking smug and self-assured, Emma calmly laid out her preliminary findings. One by one, she presented screenshots of fraudulent invoices, highlighted missing funds, and pointed out unexplained expenses. The room grew quieter with each revelation until you could hear a pin drop. Finally, Emma leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. "This isn't just sloppy bookkeeping," she said. "It's negligence at best, and potentially illegal activity. You've been using residents' money for your own convenience, including storing supplies in my garage without permission. I suggest you remove those items immediately and start preparing for serious reforms, because this isn't going to end quietly." For once, the board members were speechless. Their usual air of superiority had evaporated, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Emma watched them squirm, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. Justice might not be served overnight, but she'd taken the first step, and it felt good. The private meeting with the HOA board had left Emma feeling a mix of emotions: satisfaction at seeing their shocked faces, but also a simmering frustration that this wasn't over yet. The board members hadn't outright admitted guilt, of course. Instead, they scrambled to defend themselves, offering weak excuses and half-hearted apologies. Mr. Thompson tried to downplay the findings, calling them minor clerical errors, while Mrs. Langley attempted to shift blame onto vague third parties. But Emma wasn't fooled. She knew exactly what she had uncovered, and now it was time to take things public. At the next scheduled HOA meeting, the room buzzed with an unusual energy. Word had spread quickly about Emma's investigation, though no one knew the full details yet. Neighbors who rarely attended meetings showed up, curious and suspicious. Some sat quietly, arms crossed, while others whispered among themselves, speculating about what might happen next. The board members looked uneasy as they took their seats at the front table, clearly aware that this wouldn't be an ordinary gathering. When Emma stood up to speak, the room fell silent. All eyes were on her, and she took a deep breath before beginning. "Good evening, everyone," she started, her voice calm but firm. "Many of you may know me as your neighbor, Emma Carter. What you might not know is that I'm also a state tax examiner, and recently I was assigned to audit our very own HOA." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Emma paused for effect before continuing. "What I found during my investigation concerns every single person in this room. Over the past few years, the HOA has mismanaged funds, inflated expenses, and neglected basic responsibilities, all while hiding behind vague rules and intimidation tactics. Let me show you some examples." She pulled out a stack of documents and began presenting her findings, projecting key pieces of evidence onto a screen for everyone to see. First, she displayed photos of the cracked sidewalks and rusted playground equipment, juxtaposed with invoices claiming those repairs had been completed. Then came the fake vendor names and the unexplained withdrawals. Each slide hit harder than the last, painting a picture of incompetence and dishonesty. But Emma saved the most personal revelation for last. Turning to face the board directly, she said, "And let's not forget how the HOA used my garage for storage without my permission, as if it belonged to them. This isn't just about financial misconduct. It's about respect, or rather, the lack of it. They've treated us like we don't matter, like our voices can be ignored because they hold all the power." By the time she finished speaking, the room erupted into murmurs of disbelief and anger. Residents who had long suspected something was off finally had proof, and they weren't going to stay quiet anymore. One man stood up, shaking his head. "I always wondered why my fees kept going up while nothing got fixed. Now I know." Another woman chimed in, her voice trembling with emotion. "They fined me $200 for putting up holiday lights last year. Meanwhile, they're stealing from us." Emma watched as the tide turned against the board. For once, the people of Maple Ridge Estates weren't afraid to speak up. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their usual confidence crumbling under the weight of collective outrage. Mrs. Langley tried to interject, stammering something about misunderstandings, but her words were drowned out by the rising voices around her. Before closing the meeting, Emma made sure to outline the next steps. "State authorities will review these findings and determine appropriate action," she explained. "In the meantime, I expect the HOA to cooperate fully, including removing all unauthorized items from my garage immediately. And moving forward, we need transparency and accountability. No more secrets, no more lies." As the meeting adjourned, Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had done everything she could to expose the truth and empower her neighbors. While the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew the community was stronger when united. And tonight, they had taken the first step toward reclaiming control from those who had abused it for far too long. In the days following the explosive HOA meeting, Maple Ridge Estates buzzed with a newfound energy. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now gathered on front lawns and sidewalks, sharing stories of frustration and disbelief. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing years of pent-up resentment toward the board's heavy-handed rule. Emma found herself at the center of it all, not just as the whistleblower, but as a symbol of resistance against unchecked authority. The HOA board, meanwhile, was in full damage control mode. The state tax authorities had launched a formal investigation based on Emma's report, issuing subpoenas for additional documents and scheduling interviews with key figures. Faced with mounting pressure, the board members scrambled to distance themselves from each other, pointing fingers and shifting blame. Mrs. Langley sent out an email to residents claiming she'd been misled by Mr. Thompson, while Mr. Paddle quietly resigned from his position, citing personal reasons. Even the usually domineering Mr. Thompson seemed to shrink under the weight of scrutiny, avoiding eye contact whenever Emma passed him in the neighborhood. But Emma wasn't satisfied with mere apologies or resignations. She wanted accountability and justice. When the state investigators requested her input during their review, she made sure to emphasize the broader impact of the HOA's actions. "This isn't just about missing funds," she told them firmly. "It's about how they treated people. They manipulated rules, intimidated homeowners, and acted like they were above the law. That culture needs to change." Her words resonated deeply with both the investigators and her neighbors. Inspired by Emma's courage, several residents came forward with their own grievances, adding fuel to the fire. One couple revealed they'd been fined repeatedly for refusing to remove a tree in their yard, only to discover the fine exceeded the cost of cutting it down. Another homeowner shared how the HOA had denied them permission to install wheelchair ramps despite medical necessity, citing aesthetic concerns. Each story painted a clearer picture of an organization that prioritized control over compassion. As the investigation progressed, the consequences began to pile up. The state imposed hefty fines on the HOA for financial misconduct and ordered them to repay misused funds. Legal action loomed for certain board members accused of outright fraud. Meanwhile, new regulations were put in place to ensure transparency. Monthly financial reports would now be shared openly with residents, and major decisions required majority approval from homeowners rather than unilateral rulings by the board. For Emma, though, the most satisfying moment came when the last box was removed from her garage. A crew hired by the HOA arrived one Saturday morning, hauling away the supplies that had invaded her space without permission. As she watched them load the final stack into a truck, she couldn't help but smile. Her garage was finally hers again, a small victory, but one that felt monumental after everything she'd endured. That evening, a group of neighbors organized an impromptu gathering in Emma's driveway to celebrate. Someone brought cookies, another brought lemonade, and soon the air was filled with laughter and conversation. For the first time in years, Maple Ridge Estates felt less like a dictatorship and more like a true community. "You really did it," Emma said Sarah, a young mother who lived 2 doors down. "You stood up to them when no one else would." Emma shook her head modestly. "I didn't do it alone. Everyone here played a part. If anything, this proves what we can accomplish when we work together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Emma felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She hadn't moved to Maple Ridge Estates expecting drama or heroics, but sometimes life threw challenges your way for a reason. And in standing up not just for herself, but for her entire community, Emma had discovered something unexpected. Strength she never knew she had, and friendships she'd cherish forever. Weeks turned into months, and Maple Ridge Estates began to transform in ways no one could have predicted. The fallout from the HOA scandal had shaken the neighborhood to its core, but instead of leaving behind bitterness, it sparked a wave of positive change. With new regulations in place and many of the old board members replaced by residents eager to rebuild trust, the community started healing. For Emma Carter, this transformation was more than just satisfying. It was inspiring. The newly elected HOA board was a stark contrast to its predecessor. Gone were the days of secrecy and intimidation. In their place stood transparency and collaboration. Monthly meetings became open forums where homeowners could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Budgets were posted online for everyone to review, and projects that had been promised for years, like fixing potholes and repainting fences, finally came to life. Neighbors worked side by side during community cleanup days, planting flowers along sidewalks and painting murals at the playground. Slowly but surely, Maple Ridge Estates began to feel like the tight-knit, welcoming neighborhood Emma had hoped for when she first moved in. Emma herself became something of a local legend. Her fearless stand against the corrupt board earned her not only respect, but also gratitude from her neighbors. People often stopped her while she was out walking her dog or picking up groceries to thank her for what she'd done. "You changed everything around here," one elderly neighbor told her with tears in his eyes. "We were so tired of feeling powerless." Though flattered, Emma always deflected the praise, insisting she was simply doing what anyone else would have done. But deep down, she knew this experience had changed her too. It reminded her of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it feels intimidating or overwhelming. As a tax examiner, she'd always taken pride in uncovering the truth, but seeing how her skills could directly benefit those around her gave her work new meaning. Still, Emma didn't let the victory go to her head. She remained vigilant, attending every HOA meeting and keeping tabs on the new leadership to ensure history wouldn't repeat itself. She encouraged her neighbors to stay engaged as well, reminding them that accountability was everyone's responsibility. "If we don't speak up, nothing will change," she often said. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us working together." As time went on, Emma settled into her life in Maple Ridge Estates with a renewed sense of peace. Her garage, once filled with unwanted boxes, now housed her gardening tools and holiday decorations, a sign that her home truly belonged to her again. She spent weekends tending to her flower beds, chatting with neighbors over coffee, and even joining a book club hosted by Sarah, the young mother who had thanked her months earlier. Life felt lighter, brighter, and infinitely more fulfilling. Looking back, Emma realized this ordeal had taught her valuable lessons, not just about fighting injustice, but about resilience, community, and the power of unity. She had walked into Maple Ridge Estates expecting a quiet, uneventful life, only to find herself embroiled in a battle for fairness and respect. And yet she wouldn't trade the experience for anything. It had shown her that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, creating waves of change far beyond what she imagined. One crisp autumn morning, as Emma sipped her coffee on the front steps of her house, she smiled at the sight of children playing in the freshly renovated park across the street. The laughter echoed through the air, mingling with the scent of fallen leaves. For the first time since moving in, Emma felt completely at home, not just because of the beautiful surroundings, but because of the people who shared them with her. They weren't just neighbors anymore, they were family. And as she sat there, watching the sun rise over the neatly trimmed lawns and white picket fences, Emma knew one thing for certain. Sometimes life throws challenges your way not to break you, but to show you exactly how strong and connected you really are.